This is KMJ at KMJnow.com or wherever you stream. Welcome to the Marc Kapetan Show. This is attorney Marc Kapetan, your host. Today's show is brought to you by the Kapetan Brothers Law Firm. We've been serving the Central Valley since 1995. If you or anybody you know has been injured in an auto accident, a truck accident, or a motorcycle accident, give us a call at 559-498-8000 Monday through Fridays. You could call on Saturdays at the Kapetan Brothers. If you've been arrested or cited for a criminal offense, also give us a call. Kapetan Brothers, 559-498-8000. We are the Valley's law firm. Folks, a fascinating thing. KMJ, get ready for this, okay? A fascinating thing is occurring in the world that has implications in society, sociology, politics, religion, psychology, even in the commercial world, and a myriad of other segments of society. It has been the subject of persecution, prosecution, discourse, and debate. The very nature of the subject goes to the core of what it is to be human and what it is, quite frankly, to be in a very Shakespearean sense. I will give a caveat prior to today's discussion that I am a very matter-of-fact guy. I believe that I answer questions in the simplest of terms because I'm a simple guy. And although I love the psychology of life and I love the emotional discussions we have on this show, many times I resign myself to the fact that our lives consist of about 50 to 80 years on this earth, if we are lucky, and that we make the best of it before we die. That there are no great mysteries, even though we are constantly searching for mysteries, that we get out of it what we put into it. In that light, I'm very much a pragmatist, and I guess one would say an existentialist. Today's guest is a longtime public figure, most prominently as a former sportscaster for KCTV Channel 24 News. Currently, he is a pastor, a podcaster, a life coach, and counselor to many on his podcast, The Unconventional Pastor Paul. He is also the husband of Fresno's former mayor, Paul Swearengin, and that sort of gives it away a little bit. But significantly for today's show, much of the topic of discussion will be his transition to a life as a woman and the struggles he has had with a very, very religious family past, a search for an identity, and coming to grips with a life filled with years of conflicting beliefs, mental health challenges, and doubt. Typically, this topic is displayed by shouts from the left and shouts from the right. And our beliefs may not align today, quite frankly, but I am fascinated to see where this conversation will travel. So KMJ, come along for the ride because you know him, you love him. Please welcome to the Marc Kapetan Show, Paul Swearengin.
That was beautiful. Did you write that or did somebody write it for you?
Of course I wrote that. Marcella, I didn't spend hours and hours studying you. That's very, very nice of you to say. We've had a great conversation before this show. You seem to be a sweet, lovely guy. I don't know much about you. I know you're the sportscaster. You were at KC for how long?
I was at KC for about 4 years.
Yeah.
And then I stepped out of there, actually went to work for a community hospital for a while with their physicians group over at Sante Health System, and then went to work at ESPN, the ESPN radio affiliate here, until I got a group together and we bought it. Ran it for a while, then we sold it to the ever lovely Chris Pacheco.
And I was about to say, you were palling around with Chris Pacheco.
Yeah, I worked with Chris for
that explains a lot.
2 or 3 years. We had so much fun together, and then I stepped into pastoring and started a church and led that for about 10 years.
That's right. You were part of. I just saw and I wasn't sure if that was it. Was it not the K Dogs? No, the something Dogs. that group that you had that owned that company.
Fat Dog.
The Fat Dog, right? Fat Dog.
Fat Dog. Yes.
So that was you. That was part of you. You were part of that, right?
Yeah.
7 guys owned the station.
No, that was the group before us.
Okay.
It was a long sordid history.
Okay.
Yes.
Listen. I like I said, other than that, and seeing you, talk about sports, etc., which I'm not a sports guy, for God's sakes. So you've had a lifetime thinking about this issue. You are going, and folks, check out the Marc Kapetan Show on YouTube and Facebook, etc. You've had a lifetime probably of thinking about this issue of identity, sexuality, etc. And bear with me if I try to understand a lot of it. And I normally discuss the early life of a guest maybe in one of the later segments, but I think it makes up so much of you that I just want to sort of discuss it right from the very beginning. And by the way, thank you at the very beginning of all this for being so open to be able to come on here, and especially in front of an audience like KMJ, which is probably not, your greatest supporters in this act of transitioning.
It's probably the most important audience to talk to because there's such vitriol and misunderstanding and I think, frankly, outright lies about trans communities. If I can adjust your language just a bit, I'm not transitioning to a woman. I'm on a journey of discovery, and what I would call myself is non-gendered in that I was given a diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder, so I'm trying to figure out what that means, and there are parts in here that are of different genders, and so we're just trying to figure out what that means working together. But there is presentation of, there's always been a fascination in me that of feminine presentation of so I have my nails done.
You look like every rock and roll buddy that I've ever known.
Well, I just want to tell
painted nails,
every male out
earrings,
there,
and great hair.
Every male, if you have never gotten your nails done, you don't know what you're missing. It is so amazing. I just had a pedicure today, and there is just nothing like it. You guys, we're just getting ripped off, guys.
That's so funny. Frank Arnold, my buddy who gets pedicures. There you go, Frank. I heard it's wonderful.
And I go to regular therapy, and so then, I'm just like wrung out after therapy, and I always schedule, if I schedule a nail appointment, I schedule it right after therapy. So it's like my post-therapy therapy.
You sound like Marcella, although you don't do therapy, Marcella. I didn't mean to say it that way, but you're always scheduling things around your nail appointments, etc.
Oh yeah, you got to do it.
Okay.
And so it's a journey, and I was always very ashamed of all these things because of my religious upbringing. So I'm trying them out now.
One thing that I wanted to debate, we didn't want to get into debates. One of the things that I sort of wanted you to ponder is whether KMJ, because at one point you have a lot of, in your podcast, The Unconventional Pastor, you have a lot of pushback against conservative, right-wing, conservative, Republican, blah, 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 blah. And I sit there and I say, is the side of, especially the new conservative party, or the Trumpian type party, is what has caused more harm? The conservative side of saying, whether it's a religious or non-religious, of it's a matter of fact thing, or the left radical side that has taken these people with identity issues that are trying to discover themselves and say, oh, go ahead, have whatever surgery you want, cut off whatever you want, add whatever you want, and what's more harmful to the psyche of a person?
I'm trying to figure out on the telling a parent, take your child to a doctor, take your child to a therapist, ask them what is the best care for your child, and making that decision together as a family. How is that worse than some right-winger saying, no, we know best, we're telling you what you can and cannot do?
And the beautiful part that hopefully we could come to at least somewhat of an agreement on is on the left, and again, I don't like getting political, it is take that child without the parent being part of it. And so at least when it comes to right and left, you could somewhat agree that at least the family has to be involved and the parents should be involved in this decision making, which is quite honestly a more right wing type. And believe me, I'm not going to pigeonhole you and try to make you a Republican for God's sakes, But at least you do, and I see from just your conversation that you may not have some of the beliefs of many of the radicals on the left side, but you at least know that the family should be involved in this discussion. It should be a family discussion.
Yeah, of course. And I don't rail what I'm doing is a little bit of a caricature online, and I'm going against a caricature. One of my taglines is "Thinking is not a sin." I'm trying to get people to think. I think the dumbest thing I've ever heard somebody running for office say, and I won't tell you who said it, I'll let you figure it out for yourself. Little Johnny goes to school, a boy comes home, a girl. Dumbest thing ever said. That person should have been disqualified from running for office right at that point, because that does not happen.
Go look that up, Marcella. I think I know who it is too. So we'll be right back with Paul Swearengin right after this. This is the Marc Kapetan Show on KMJ. This is KMJ at KMJnow.com or wherever you stream. Folks, you can check out all the KMJ shows at KMJnow.com. The podcasts of Ray Appleton, John and Christina, Philip and E, The Morning Show with Chris Gabriel. Go ahead and check out all the boys from The Morning. They're great, by the way. I love listening to The Morning Show. KMJnow.com. Also, if you've been arrested or if you've been in an accident, call the Kapetan Brothers, 559-498-8000 anytime during the week. Kapetan Brothers, we're the Valley's law firm. You could also check out my guest for today, his book. We're on with Paul Swearengin, talking about a transition in life that he's going through. And he has a book called Religious Right, Religiously Wrong. And obviously talking about the religious right. And we wanted to get into it because Paul was your sportscaster, the friendly face on KC24. The face is not quite the same face. It is maybe prettier. I love the hair.
I've always been blessed with good hair.
You've been blessed with good hair. So have I, buddy.
As have you. Yes, I love your hair too.
And quite frankly, folks, we're talking about his transitioning to what he may not know. In fact, you have a quote basically, am I gay, am I weird, or am I a little bit of both? And so you're really still in the midst of struggling as to what may be going on?
Yeah, I mean, this is very new, and I'm actually in the work I do in life coaching, I'm finding this with a lot of Gen X men, that there was never a language or an understanding of, something's weird about me. Somehow I don't, and I know weird is kind of a negative word, but I call myself wonderfully weird because something's unusual about me, but there's no language, and I feel like probably for me it was like I have some demon in me or something, and so I'm just going to go to hell one day.
And that comes from what you've explained as a extremely religious pastor of a father. You sound like a typical priest kid, by the way, or PK as we used to call him back in the day, right? PKs, right? Extremely religious father and I noticed that a lot of your vitriol and bent against the religious right is based on the fact that your dad was very big, I guess, in the moral majority movement back in the early 80s.
Yeah, he was. We were in a denomination of evangelical Christianity called the Assemblies of God, and he was a muckety-muck in the Assemblies of God, and the moral majority, they were very much ensconced in it. And
still around?
Oh yeah,
Dad.
Oh, my dad. Yeah. No, my dad passed away a couple of years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And mom?
She's still around.
So you explain in your public. I'm not outing anything that is not already public on his podcast. You explain not only a very ultra religious, but also a very abusive father.
Yeah.
Will mom agree with that?
No, but that's not uncommon. And what dissociative identity disorder is, our minds are so brilliant. And it's my therapist tells me all the time, you're not broken. Your brain worked exactly the way it is supposed to work. As a child, you don't have any way to process the trauma that's happening to you. And so it cordons it off, and a part of your brain holds it. And so I never knew this till a few years ago. I'm watching this show, and it says here's some attributes of a trauma survivor, an adult survivor of childhood, particular type of trauma, and I'm like, well, I'm all those, but I haven't suffered this trauma. And so I went and saw my therapist that week and told him this, and he's like, oh yeah, He says literally, he looks at the wall and then he's like, okay, I never do this. But he said, I knew this the first day you walked in the door.
Okay, so the problem that I have with that is, and I don't mean a problem with your thoughts on it, but the doctors are so accommodating these days to the emotional feelings of a person. I think there's two emotional feelings that you go through. The emotional feeling that you're going through with all the trauma that you've had in the past, and the trying to understand what's going on inside the head, and then the emotional feeling of a doctor telling you whether you're broken or not. And they're so intent of saying that a person's not broken to make them feel like there's nothing wrong with them. But the issue is, emotionally, is it fair to say that there's something wrong, that it may have occurred from the abusive father and your disassociation that has created this multiple dissociative disorder thing, but it is nonetheless a psychological, and I know you hate the word disorder, but it's nonetheless a psychological state of being that if you didn't go through that trauma, you wouldn't have. So why not say, yes, there is something wrong that I have to deal with and that I need therapy? And with that same breath, is it the type of therapy that should help me understand what is going wrong and try to fix that, instead of going to these extremes that we see nowadays of transsexualism, where they're going through surgical procedures and stuff like that?
Well, that is, if you're saying that a transition is directly tied to the trauma, which is, that's not scientifically true.
Yeah. So you don't think that your transition is based on this dissociation?
I don't.
That whatever your father may have done, or whatever that trigger, can you identify what that trigger was?
What trigger of what?
Can you identify what act or event occurred that may have caused a dissociative disorder, or series of acts that it was? Was it just purely abuse?
Oh, I'm very aware of what it was.
Okay, and I don't want you to have to say it.
Those aren't things I disclose in public.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm assuming it's a common thing. Is it part of it, I'm assuming, is based on the fact that whatever your father saw in you, he didn't feel was religiously acceptable according to the way he defined religion?
Yeah. I think that you said that very well, and that's very thoughtful of you to think. So the way I see it is, and I've worked through this a lot, there was a child that existed, and that child was super sweet and super empathetic and cried a lot. And and it had impacts on my parents in different ways, because they had their own struggles, and my mother was very drawn to that child because that child was so empathetic and so sweet, and I was like the security pet of my mom, and I think that made my dad. It triggered something in him. I don't know exactly.
She was not protective of you, though, when he started acting out regarding that.
She couldn't be. She had no power in the household, and he's a pastor. He's seen as God in this church that we have, and he is the breadwinner of the house. So everything that we did in our house was to protect Dad from anything that happened inside the household ever getting out.
Let me ask you this. World. Because it is a dramatic change that you're going through. at some point, and here's the simplistic thing that I was talking about, Marcella. With
I'm a nuanced guy, so that's where we struggle together a little bit.
But the simplistic side of me says, Paul, myself, if I'm you, my dad was fucked up. Have you gotten to the point to where you could just say, my dad was fucked up, and I'm okay with it because I don't want to be fucked up myself, and I don't need to go through these machinations. I could just say, he was wrong, I was right, or I was what I was, and that's all there is to it.
It's funny, I just did a video today that's what the Christianity I grew up in told us to do. Just go to the cross and pray and it'll all be good. Just choose joy. I want to be healthy. I don't want to act like everything's okay. So I'm walking through, okay, bleep this out, get ready. I'm walking through the shit because I want to live a real life. So I was this person, I became this mask.
Yeah.
Paul Swearengin that lived from the age of 6 until 57 was a fake. So I could survive.
Okay.
And now I'm trying to become the real person that lived before.
And we're going to talk more about the real Paul Swearengin right after this. This is the Marc Kapetan Show on KMJ. This is KMJ at KMJnow.com or wherever you stream. Hey, folks, welcome back to the Marc Kapetan Show. We're going to pop this music down and get right back into it with with the wonderfully weird, your words, not mine, the wonderfully weird Paul Swearengin from KC24 back in the day and from a lot of other things, but most currently from the Unconventional Pastor podcast. Paul has written a book, Religious Right, Religiously Wrong. And in the last segment, we were talking about the sense of me, and I had posed the question. Paul's been transitioning to what he's not quite sure, and he's trying to figure out. I think, have you figured out what the final determination of how you would refer to yourself?
I don't know that I'm that concerned about what the label is on it, but I'm just going with non-gendered right now. I'm just not that concerned about it.
And we were talking about the dad, and I had posed the question to you. What, you've gone through blah 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 years of life already, and at some point, do you just say that was his religion, that was his screwed up way of bastardizing the Bible? And believe me, many people out there in KMJ will say, no, the Bible says a man's a man and a woman's a woman. I have that type of belief as the existentialist, pragmatic guy, maybe. Grew up in a Greek Orthodox household, but not ultra religious as far as that's concerned. I was a science major, and to me, the science, and that's a debatable thing. According to the left and the right, it's a debatable thing. I think it's pretty set in stone regarding DNA and genderism. But at some point, you were saying you didn't quite fully explain yourself because I posed the question to you: Can't you just say at one point, Dad was wrong? I don't like the way he believed, and he didn't accept me. My mom didn't protect me from whatever abuses he had thrust upon me because I was this sweet, nice child. And I'm going to say, I am Paul. I am the man that I grew up to be, or whatever it may be, and I'm comfortable with that. And if I have these hard feelings of identity, I realize that it's due to this screwed up guy that screwed me up.
Yeah. Which is a wonderful question. By the way, I just have to throw in, the Bible in no way says there are only men and women, and science, it's like saying there's only land and sea and ignoring the fact that there are swamps and all kinds of other things too.
I like that analogy. I do say, and let's point it out because I know everybody's going to get to the same thing that I did. The Old Testament does talk about an Adam and an Eve, a man and a woman, but you're talking more of the Christian Bible, you say, doesn't have any reference to men or women as far as that's concerned.
Right. And it literally says,
I don't know enough of the Bible.
In the kingdom, there's neither male nor female. But I don't want to get off that.
No, but you know what's interesting, and I'm going to let you get to your point. What is interesting to me is whatever hard feelings you have or whatever feelings you had about this ultra-religious father, you became a pastor yourself.
Yeah. I love the Bible. I've always loved the Bible. I love Jesus. It's just Christians that I can't stand because they're taking the Bible and using it to harm people. It's the opposite of who Jesus is.
But like I told my brother Peter one day, I said, has the Bible caused more wars? And he goes, could you imagine the amount of wars and killings there would be without a Bible telling people to go to church every Sunday and to be good and to make sure you love your brother as you would yourself and turn the other cheek?
Oh, I could go on forever about that.
Okay.
Let's just...
You're more of a pro than I am. Go ahead.
You were... The correlation that a lot of people make is you were abused by your parent, thus you're gay or whatever they want to tie it to. The truth is, the Paul Swearengin that I lived as for all these years is the person I was because of the abuse. That I had to become the sports guy, woman chasing, all-American boy to survive in a household that was nothing but masculinity. The only thing my dad and I could relate upon was sports. That was it.
Yeah.
And I look back and I hated that. So
I wondered if the sports thing was a response to that. I have that as one of my questions.
Probably, yeah. And the pastor thing probably too in some ways. But so the point is, I became a different person than who I was born as because I had to survive. And that's the beauty, again, of the brain. So, yes, I'm doing therapy because I have to learn to manage this dissociative identity disorder now that I've really discovered it. But I think it's beautiful. I don't think it's broken. But I have to learn to not have to mask and please people as I learn to survive. I have to learn to live as myself.
And I guess the problem that I would have is how far it's being taken in today's society is, listen, I had plenty of friends. I remember and believe me, no one could pinpoint who it is because I lived on the East Coast. I remember the two Michaels that lived in my neighborhood. Well, the one Michael, they were both very, very good friends of mine, and one of my best friends. And I remember the one had a little southern voice. He used to talk like this. He'd say, "Mama," and his mom would say, "Michael," and they were the two Michaels. And in 5th grade, everybody sort of went, "Oh, they're different," you know? And that may be the wrong thing to say they're different, but what we meant is they are likely gay, all right? And so at some point, you ask yourself, they grew up. I remember the one was he went on Broadway and stuff like that and became an extremely successful guy. And you sit there and you say, well, that was him. He was a gay man, and in my day, a guy would come out, and the sad part is that it was shocking to society when a guy would come out. I think that was wrong. I think we should have accepted people how you know, if they came out gay or something like that. But the extent to what it's being taken today with the surgical procedures and requiring us to memorize the pronouns and references, how far do you take that? How far do you have those beliefs, and how far do you think you're going to go in this transitioning journey?
What I guess if I can answer you with a question, like what harm is it to you to try to? I mean, you're so kind to me in here.
Yeah.
How is that harming you?
Because I think surgically altering a person. Number one, listen, I don't like plastic surgery, for God's sakes, but you know, we already said I have great skin, so I.
Yeah, my wife has Botox on a regular basis. Oh, sorry, honey. Should we ban that? You know,
because
a woman that wants to have breast augmentation, or a man that has breast tissue and has it taken off. Should we ban that?
Because I believe that the the treatment. It's like saying with a person who has, and this may be somewhat offensive in the sense that a person that has schizophrenia, that to tell the person that the voices in inside their head are really real. Okay, at some point, do we let a person encourage a young person to rectify the conflict that's in their brain so that they're okay with I don't mean okay that they were traumatized in the past, but they're okay understanding that it has caused some sort of issue with them, that they could live as a happy person. That I think that we have to work on that side of the psychology instead of correcting psychology with surgical procedures that I think are going to cause more psychological damage in the future, because they're still not going to be fully functioning females.
But
and at some point, are we making it more difficult on society and them?
But the science is on the side of when, and very few, this idea of like children are having their genitals chopped off every day is just not happening. That's a total straw man.
Well,
science is when we allow children to walk this out, or young adults, they are healthier on the other side of that emotionally than not. And so there's cruelty in not allowing it.
And I think that's where we would disagree. Those children eventually become adults that will chop off whatever. And that's where I think we're doing a disservice to the people that are really struggling with
well,
these
science
things.
does not back you up in that. There's a few people that transition back, but they're very, very few.
And that's where the KMJ listeners are going to be shouting and screaming into the radio. We'll be right back after this with Paul Swearengin. This is the Marc Kapetan Show on KMJ. This is KMJ. Welcome back to the Marc Kapetan Show, folks. We're going to get right back into it with Paul Swearengin, who is publicly known here in Fresno as a former sportscaster, doing all the manly things that a sportscaster does, hanging around with Chris Pacheco and the Fat Dogs, right? Back in the day. You can't get any more manly man than that. And Paul is going through a transition to what we will time will eventually know.
To human.
That's a nice way of saying it, Paul. Yeah, I get it. And we joked around during the break that yes, you do look like every rock and roll band member / roadie friend of mine back in the day. So with the painted fingernails and the earrings and hair and all that stuff. Okay. We've gone through a lot of the struggles that you had in life, and we've had debates and discussions. But let me ask you some sort of semi-political things. Personal pronouns.
I'm going they, them, because I am a functional multiple, we call it. So, yeah.
I've known, this is a hypothetical, but I've known you all my life. Is it offensive for me to say, hey, Paul, that's my buddy Paul. He's an old buddy of mine.
No. What is offensive is when somebody intentionally mispronouns just because they want to be cruel. Cruelty is
bad altogether, right?
Yeah.
I had a
slip ups of friends is nothing. You know?
I had a couple clients that I had to, that I did adjust a little bit. Honestly, I've changed my beliefs somewhat, particularly because of one client that chose, well, I won't say it, but if I meet a person, I'm going to call them what I think. If they become a friend, if they're, if I have enough respect, maybe out of respect or their feelings, I'll do it. And I have done that in the past. But we were talking about the pendulum swinging between the left and the conservative right. And I think at some point we're asking so much of society that you're going to get a pushback to where people are going to say, screw the pronouns. I'm done with it. And
I think being an asshole is an asshole no matter which side of the pendulum you're on.
Yeah.
Like I heard of a football coach the other day who cut off an interview because he was asked what his pronouns are. And I think that's being an asshole. And I think somebody who's angry that you messed up their pronouns is also being an asshole.
I may agree that if I have a friend who has been transitioning for a long time, that if I just started pestering him with male pronouns, I would, maybe that's being an asshole.
Right.
I don't think the football coach is. I think
I think he totally is.
We've grown up with this understanding, plain understanding. By when I walk up, I could usually tell what a person is, a man or a woman. And you're asking to change tens of thousands of years. And I understand that it is your cross to bear. Probably not the greatest term. Well, you said you love the Bible. Your cross to bear, that you want to change society. And so, I'm the old school guy that says, no, society was just fine as it is.
Do you think there was a time in history when people were like, well, why can't I say the N-word? Who are you to tell me?
No,
I've said the N-word all my life. Why can't I say the N-word?
We talked about that during the break, and we all learned that the N-word was the wrong word to say when Archie Bunker would say it, and we all learned it. And then
we learned it.
Yeah,
and we all said this is a good thing. It's a good thing to be a better person. It's a good thing to be more kind.
But then the people that we were trying to be kind to started saying the N-word over and over and over every day on the news, and now I'm not allowed to say it. So do I think it's being an asshole? No, I don't think it's being an asshole. If I want to use the word, I could use the word.
I don't use the word because
No. I don't use the word. You could call me a racist if I do use the word. Okay, and I'm okay with that.
You ever hear the song "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother"? Like
I love it. Righteous Brothers.
I can call my brother anything in the world, but you can't call my brother that.
And I understand that, but who are we to demand that in that sense? If you want to personally take up beat up the guy for calling your brother whatever, I get that. But to demand it of society,
called other people snowflakes. Jeez, you guys are such a bunch of. You want me to say they them? I am so offended.
Can we agree that we love the Righteous Brothers?
I do love the Righteous Brothers.
Okay,
yeah.
Men in women's sports, or I don't even know how to term it. It is DNA, politically incorrect DNA men in women's sports. Yeah. Wrong or right?
I think the science is still out on it, but again, it's a political chip. It's not anything.
You don't feel bad for the young ladies that are trying their hardest to do the 440 race and the best time that a woman could do it, and all of a sudden a guy comes in and does it.
So there was
2 seconds better.
There was 22 trans women in women's sports last year from K through college. Yeah. And we don't know the names of any of them because none of them were dominating their sport.
Yeah, listen, man.
So if it's if men are coming in and taking over the sport, why aren't they taking over all of the sports when they're in there?
Most of the women could beat me too, but still, when it comes to the elite athletes, the ones that are in the Olympics, okay, we're not going to agree on that either.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about something.
Again, it's a political chip, just like we used to be told, if the black boys play against our nice white boys, they've been bred and they're going to, hurt our white boys. These are the same arguments that have been used through all of history in America to marginalize people.
I don't think it's a marginal. See, and even that, I don't think it's a marginalization. I think at some point we have to say, hey, a fact is a fact that I think a black athlete is just a better athlete, for God's sakes. I mean, and whether it's because
so has sports been ruined by having black athletes play sports?
No, but you'll see more. You see a big shift in the NBA. I mean, when they weren't doing jump shots, and there was a white guy, and then all of a sudden a Jackie Robinson in baseball comes along or something like that, you realize, oh, this is just a superior athlete.
Would you advocate for having just black divisions of sports and white divisions of sports, because that's what people are advocating for trans women?
No, listen, come on now.
What do you mean, come on now?
This
is the same argument. Now, so what I see is a trans woman, yes, if she's gone through puberty as a male, she has the potential for bigger muscle mass, but it's harder for her to maintain muscle mass after going through the HRT. Okay. She has less ability to have lung capacity. Okay. So there are advantages and disadvantages.
I would debate this all day long with you, but we have a minute and 15 seconds, and I want to talk about
Kindness
the most important.
Is really important.
I want to talk about the most important woman, whether she's a great athlete or not, and that's your lovely wife, Ashley. Struggle for her also?
Of course.
Yeah.
And we're walking through it together because we want to demonstrate that human beings can walk through these hard things together.
Yeah, and I understand she's sticking by you with all that.
Yeah, she's a pretty wonderful person.
Yeah, good for you, buddy. All right, Paul Swearengin, wonderful having you on.
I hope I was a good guest.
No, you're a great guest. Check out the Unconventional Pastor. Check out his book, The Religious Right and The Religiously Wrong. Right?
Right.
Thanks for being on the show, buddy.
Thank you. What an honor.
You take it easy. This is the Marc Kapetan Show. We'll see you next week. Thanks to all our sponsors and thanks to the wonderful Marcella Solorio-Taylor. See you next week on KMJ. Hey, folks. Paul Swearengin. You remember him, the sportscaster on TV. Paul, we had a great show talking about a transition in his life. And as you could see, we've been very plain talking about it. It is a fascinating show. It is very plain talking. We debated a little bit, but it was more of an understanding. And I hope you had a great time. Was it good for you?
It was so fun, and it went so fast. I can't believe we did the whole show already.
The Unconventional Pastor is his podcast. We want you to check it out. He also has a book. Let me grab it real quick here. The Religious Right and Religiously Wrong. We had plenty of disagreement. We had plenty of agreement. And so I think it's a wonderful show. I want you all to check it out on KMJ Saturdays at noon. And you can check it out on YouTube and Facebook and wherever you stream, right? All right.
Sounds great. Thank you, guys.